Welcome to episode 137 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing Lou Simon. She's an independent writer, director, and producer. We talk through her career, how she got started as a writer, director, producer, and we also talk about her latest film, All Girls Weekend. So stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking us on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Over on iTunes, I want to thank MK Star Blazer, who left me a very nice review. Thank you for that. It's very much appreciated. These iTunes reviews really are helpful. It helps get the podcast listed in more places in iTunes so it reaches a broader audience. Also, if you subscribe to the podcast in iTunes, then you'll get the new episodes downloaded to your phone each week. Every time you plug in your phone, you can open up iTunes and the episodes will just download, and then you can just sync them up and get them on your phone very easily. That's how I listen to all of my podcasts. So that's a nice convenient way to stay current on the podcast. If you have a moment, please do leave me a review on iTunes. Those are always very much appreciated. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 137. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. A quick few words about what I'm working on. So it's been well over a week now since I completed shooting my crime action thriller script, The Pinch. I met with the editor last week and he's busy just getting things organized. We shot in 4K RAW using a Blackmagic camera and we ended up with around 16 terabytes of footage. So it's taken a bit of time for the editor to get things organized. He has to go through sync the sound, and he also has to go through and create proxy files, which are basically just low resolution files of what we shot, so that he can actually start editing in that, and then he'll, at the end, you basically output a high res version, but it makes editing go much quicker because your computer is not being taxed with these incredibly large video files. So that's just been taking him a little bit of time, but hopefully this week he'll start cutting, and hopefully by the end of this week I'll get to see a scene or two. If not this week, certainly by next week, hopefully he'll have a scene or two cut and we can really start digging into that. So I've written up a nice recap episode on The Pinch. Basically, I go into all sorts of details about how I produce this and sort of my thoughts on it. I've got it all written out. I'm just going to publish it probably in October. I've basically got the Selling Your Screenplay podcast booked up until mid-October, so I'll try and squeeze in an episode in the middle of October with this recap. Again, I'm just going to run through the production, what I think I did well and what I think I could do better on the next one. So keep an eye out for that in mid-October. I'm starting to think about a new spec script to write as well. I've got a couple of ideas. The first one is kind of a low budget action film, probably not something that I would produce and direct, but it's an idea that I've been kicking around for a little while, and I think it's an idea that producers will really like. It's got a couple of elements that a lot of producers that I've talked about recently have said, gee, I want a script that does this, that, and the other thing, and I've combined a few of those things into this idea. So I'm going to probably start writing on that within the next week or two. I'm still just kind of letting things with The Pinch settle down. There's still quite a bit of work on that, but starting to put together at least maybe an outline in the next week or two. I'll start working on the outline for this spec script. So anyway, that's what I'm working on. Now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing producer, director, and screenwriter Lou Simon. Here is the interview. Welcome, Lou, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
And thank you so much for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can give us a little overview of your background, kind of how you got into the entertainment industry, and maybe even back it up before that. As a kid, were you really interested in movies and becoming a screenwriter? Just all the way back as far as you can remember, kind of where you got this kernel of an idea to pursue a career in the entertainment industry.
Well, to be completely honest, I grew up wanting to be a novelist. I mean, I was writing since I was very little. I was writing before I was writing. I was inventing stories and stuff like that, but never thought of putting them down until I was about 10 years old. That we had to write like a short story for a class I had to do. But before that, I was like, I remember recording stories for my mom on, on a tape deck and playing it back to her because I thought it was so funny. But once I started writing regularly since I was 10, went to college even and studied creative writing with the idea of being a novelist. And then, the reality of, well, okay, how do I pay my bills until I get discovered kind of hit me. And so what I ended up doing was I convinced myself that if I went to law school and I would in New York, in the mecca, if you will, of publishing, that I'd be able to write while I went to law school, and then I'd be discovered. I never actually had to practice law, but the reality was that you just don't have time to write when you're in law school. So pursuing that career, whatever, I kind of put writing aside. I kept, trying to go back to it. I would write a little bit and then get frustrated or get writer's block, or I would get afraid of, what it's like to put yourself out there, to have people read, the most, your baby, the thing that means the most to you, and have them and being rejected. It got so bad that I actually said, you know what, that was just like a kid dream. It wasn't reality. I'm just going to give up on it. And then in 2009, I met a very nice person who, thanks to him and helping him work on the screenplay that he'd been working on, I discovered that, wow, screenplays are a lot easier to write than a novel. And so once I had helped him, then I started to write on my own, and I kept writing and writing and writing. And it was still, the idea was, okay, I'm going to be a screenwriter then. And I started submitting, and it's very, very, very hard to get anybody to read your screenplays. So after a while, I said, all right, well, if it's that hard, I'm just going to have to start making them myself. So it moved from just being a screenwriter to becoming a filmmaker.
Okay. And how did you make that transition? I mean, it's easier said than done. Just, hey, I'm going to go do my movie. Were you able to raise money? That's obviously the first step. You directed this first film, and I assume at that point you're talking about Hazmat. That looks like your first credit on IMDb. Was that the first film you wrote? You couldn't sell it, so you said, I'm just going to go out and produce it?
No, that's actually my second. I made one before that. Yeah, it's called The Awakened, and it was my, I guess you can call it my film school, because that's where I learned to do everything else that I didn't do before. And it didn't do too well, but it's enjoyable enough. It went to film festivals and stuff like that. It just didn't get distribution.
It was a feature film, or was it a short?
Yes, I actually didn't know that I should start by doing shorts. Not being completely new to the film industry, I didn't know that's how people normally do it. So I just started making features because I thought that's what it was. That's what you did. So I mean, it was one of those things. If you read enough articles, if you read enough advice and get different advice from people, they basically say, it's so hard to break into Hollywood that sometimes the best thing you can do is just make your own stuff and hope that somebody will discover your talent from that. So that's how I made that transition. And it took raising money to make the film, and learning all the other areas of pre-production and production and post-production. So I had to learn everything. And for a person who had been practicing law for a very long time, it was quite a change.
And were you in a position to do some of the financing yourself, or you had to go outside and raise outside financing?
No, we raced outside financing completely for that. Yeah.
Okay. And let's talk about that for a minute. Maybe just talk a little bit about those steps. There's definitely going to be a lot of screenwriters listening to this thinking, gee, I would like to make my own movie, but they don't necessarily have any idea how to go about raising the money. Maybe you could talk to that just a little bit about what you actually did to find people that were interested, especially in a first-time writer, first-time director. How do you convince them that this is actually a smart investment, if you will?
Well, I mean, I think in a way things happen for a reason, and I think ironically the fact that I had this long career before I went back into writing really helped, because being an attorney, first, I think people put more trust on you than they would, a 21-year-old, that just came out of school. And number two, I had a lot of connections, and I had, clients and people who were professionals that, you could say, hey, you want to give me a couple $1,000s to make a film, and it wasn't going to be the end of the world to them. You're not pitching to, young 20-something-year-olds that are in the same position as you. So I was very lucky in that regard that I had enough connections that I was able to pitch. And I think that that's probably, if you're going to be pitching to people to raise money, that's probably the ideal audience for you, because, professional doctors, lawyers those are people who have the kind of money that can say, well, $2,000 is not going to be the end of the world. But at the same time, they might want some excitement in their life, that's out of the norm of professional life that can be quite boring and tedious, So, if more than people with a lot of money, because those people tend to already have a lot of excitement in their life, so they're not looking, to do something different. And plus, that's probably how they got rich, right?
Yeah. Do you mind telling us what the budget of that first film was, Awakenings?
It was The Awakened, and it was 50 grand.
Okay. And so can you just talk, and I just like to get a sense of the scope of what people have done. So you're out pitching these people that you know professionally. Roughly, how many people would you say you pitched versus how many people actually contributed money to the project? And I think the reason I ask this question is because so many people, they go out and pitch 5 or 10 people, it doesn't work out and they get discouraged. And a lot of times I have filmmakers on and they talk about, many years and pitching hundreds, if not thousands of people, because it takes a lot.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It was, I guess, one of the lucky ones, because it wasn't a lot. I mean, it was basically, I would say we had a 50%, success rate. It was pretty good. I probably had, I don't know, probably pitched, 50 people, 60 people, something like that, and about half of those, gave.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so let's dig into your latest film, All Girls Weekend. Maybe to start out, you can just give us a log line or pitch of that film.
Okay, well, All Girls Weekend is about 5 friends that kind of have fallen out of touch, and they decide that they're going to rekindle their friendship by going to the mountains and spending a weekend together. It's supposed to be more of an adventure thing where they're going to be going ziplining and kayaking and whatever, but they decide to go hiking. And what's supposed to be something that's going to take a couple of hours turns into a complete nightmare when they get lost. And then really, really strange things start happening. And as the day progresses, and it starts getting it's winter, so it starts getting colder. They obviously have impact for the food or the water. Everything just starts going wrong, and well, people start dying.
Perfect. So where did this idea come from?
It's kind of I'm a huge environmentalist. It's very, the environment's a very big thing for me, and I love the outdoors. I love, whether it's hiking, whitewater rafting, what have you. And so I really wanted to do something that spoke to that. And then I also, all I do is horror or somewhat, thrillers, supernatural thrillers. So I wanted to put those two things together. I wanted a film that was an all-female cast. I'm a huge fan of the movie The Descent, and I wanted to do something similar, but obviously in a much smaller budget. And I also wanted something that was different than the usual, five kids in the woods with a guy with an axe,
Mm-hmm.
So I came and tell you what triggered all those things together to come into this story. Because, as writers will tell you, all of a sudden it's just there and you don't even know where it came from. But it mixed all those things that I wanted to accomplish, into one story.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about your writing process. I'd be curious to just know, how much time do you spend like outlining versus actually opening final draft and writing the script?
I spend time thinking about it the most. I think about it for a while. Depends on the story and what's going on with my life. If I'm, in the middle of something else or post-production or something like that, I don't really have time to write. So I'll just have the story in my head and I'll write notes as something comes up, as an idea comes up. Then the actual writing of the outline will probably, I would say, a day or two. And then the writing, I average about anywhere between 20 and 30 pages per day that I sit down. So it could be 3 days, be 4 days to finish the script.
Okay, wow. So that's quite I mean, you're able to crank them out pretty good. Then what is your development process looks like? So then you have this rough draft. How many iterations do you typically make? And we can talk specifically about All Girls Weekend. Just how many drafts and how much rewriting do you do?
I mean, it depends on, I usually have people read it, and depending on the feedback they give me, I think All Girls Weekend actually had the most revisions because it was originally written to be filmed in Florida in the Everglades. And then somebody told me, "Are you crazy? Like, you can't film down there. It's like so hot and it's full of mosquitoes. Everybody's gonna hate you." So I had to rewrite it to be in the mountains in Georgia. So that was a drastic change completely. And then it was, I gave it to my co-producers to read. They had feedback. We wrote that. Probably another draft after that. And then after I did the casting, since, you're dealing with low budget, so it's not like you have, Tom Cruise and, Robert De Niro. I think it's easier to change the script to tailor it to the actors. So if I find that there's, that something about an actor that's very he's very characteristic about that person. For example, in Hazmat, I had a person in mind when I wrote the script, and then afterwards, when casting came about, the actor who I liked the most was a guy who had been in the army, and he was just very army, the way he talked, everything, the way he carried himself. So I rewrote the character to be a Marine, a retired Marine, just because I thought that his tone would fit that character better. So it's easier just to tailor the script to the casting. And then you have to rewrite again once you find locations sometimes, because, we're making entire worlds and locations in our heads. When you're doing low budget, filmmaking, you're not always going to find exactly what you wanted for the budget that you wanted. So you do another rewrite to conform the script to the locations you find.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk a minute just about that development process. You mentioned you had a couple of co-producers who you send the script to, and you got notes back from them. I get emails coming in, and people are always just wondering, how do you decide what notes to take, what notes not to take, and just how do you navigate that, and how do you know when the script is ultimately finished and ready to go?
I am probably I always tell people, and it's kind of hard when you're not just the writer, but you're the director and the producer. It's kind of hard to find people who will be completely honest with you. They want to be hired, and they want the job, they want to get paid. So sometimes they'll be like, yeah, I love it, and you're like, okay, but do you really love it? like tell me now if you see a flaw in it, so I can fix it now before we film it. So it's a little bit difficult for me sometimes, to be honest. I always have to be like, don't just tell me what you think I want to hear. Tell me what you really, really think. And of course, then it hurts when they tell you. But I find that I don't know. I find that I rewatch the movies after they're done, and I think to myself, darn, I wish I'd written that differently, or I wish I'd written that line differently, or wait, hold on, that's a huge plot hole. And sometimes you don't catch it until way afterwards. And maybe nobody else caught it, but you did. I watch Hazmat now, and I can't think of it what it is right now, but at the time, a few months afterwards, I was like, oh wait, that would have never happened. But nobody seems to have caught it, so I'm just, so that's good.
One other thing that occurred to me just about the writing of these scripts is, they're very much genre films, sort of the horror thriller genre. And I'm curious, was that a genre you were very much just as a fan of movies you were into? Was there a reason you gravitated towards those particular types of films as a writer, director, producer?
I mean, I love anything that's mysterious, or there's some mysteries to be solved. So it doesn't necessarily have to be horror, but anything, I grew up watching like old black and white movies, mysteries that my mom used to watch ever since I was like a toddler. But so I like anything like that, and I'll be happy as long as it's not a drama or a comedy. If there's some kind of thrill, aspect to it, I'd be happy. What's good about horror, and it's probably the genre that a lot of people pick to start off with, is the fact that it's something you can do for a reasonable budget, and that doesn't require big stars in order for you to be able to make a film. You could do it complete on names, and it can still be seen and go pretty far. And, you have something like Paranormal Activity, for example. Not one person in there was a known actor. Mm-hmm. So your odds are better of getting distribution and be able to find, and finding an audience. If it's one of the genre of films, horror, sci-fi, fantasy.
Mm-hmm. And again, I'm just curious, where did you get clued into that? Like you just said, no drama or comedy. Did your just natural instincts gravitate towards those films? Because I totally agree, and I get a lot of people coming to my website, and they've written that drama or comedy or quirky, dramedy, and I'm like, listen, this might be the greatest script ever, but there's virtually no chance of this thing actually getting produced. So how did you kind of figure that out? It was just coincidence those were the movies you wanted to make, so and they happened to be movies that were also marketable?
I did so much research before I even made my first film. I mean, even just deciding to make my first film, it was all, it was after reading article after article about what sells, what doesn't sell, what kind of scripts that they make. I mean, I sometimes, I get a lot of people who send me scripts, just as, hey, can you help me out? Can you read my script and so on? And I get them, and, they have like, one of my favorite, examples is somebody who sent me a script that had like a plane crash, on page 15. And I'm like, you're thinking that a small producer is going to pick this up? I mean, that costs millions of dollars to do. You have to you have to be doing stories that are much more limited than that, because there's no way, unless you have a big studio, they're not going to find, you're not going to find a producer that has that kind of money. So if you do enough research and you listen to podcasts like this, and you're going to hear that over and over again. The problem is everybody thinks that they're going to be the exception, or they hear that one guy who, wrote, was a first time, screenwriter and wrote somehow a Marvel movie or something,
Yeah. And there are those examples. That's the problem. There are those sort of exceptions out there we can all point to. So now let's talk about sort of, you've written the script. What are the next steps for All Girls Weekend? Take us through those next steps of getting that production together. How did you go about raising the money for that? And just what were sort of your next steps once you felt the script was ready to go?
Well, the one good thing about having made, that was All Girls Weekend was my fourth film. Now I'm starting my fifth. Is that once you kind of develop the connections, it's a lot easier. Hazmat did really, really well, and so the investors from that, it was very easy to go and say, okay, I can give you guys your money back, and here's your money, and or we can invest it on another one. And pretty much everybody was like, listen, I just go ahead and reinvest it. Part of it is you develop a very good relationship with these people. And so they want the best thing for you, and they believe in you, and they think that you might be ending up being the next, Steven Spielberg or something. And so they want to be a part of that. And part of it is also the fact that, they kind of, when they gave it, they kind of assumed that they probably would lose it. So, for them, it's just a way to continuing, the fun ride of being part of the whole thing. And so yeah, it's for All Girls Weekend, it was very easy. I already had pretty much the funding. I just had to go back to the same investors.
Yeah. And are there any kind of perks you give to the investors that are not necessarily monetary? Obviously, you're going to give them like an executive producer credit, something like that. Do you try and bring them out to the set? Do they get to come to the premiere? Are there any creative perks you've come up with? Just because I get exactly what you're saying. These are people that, the money's not really the issue. They just have lives, and they like to sort of live vicariously through you and through this filmmaking process. So are there any creative perks that you could talk about giving these folks?
I mean, yeah, obviously, the investors are always the most important people on a set. So if they wanted to come out, they would have. The majority of them are so busy, to be honest, that they don't have time to go out. And especially All Girls Weekend, we were filming out in the, in the boonies out in the Georgia mountains. So it wasn't very accessible. But yeah, definitely they want to go to the, we have private screenings, we do special premieres, release parties, and then if we go to the film festivals, we'll always invite them, and I would say probably half of them go, and the other half is like, no, next time, and somehow they never do, but that's fine, I mean, usually these are very busy, very hardworking people, so it's not like they have a lot of free time.
Yeah. So what's sort of the end game? You're directing, writing, and producing these movies. What is sort of your ultimate goal in this business?
I guess either, it's fun because I got into this because I wanted to be a screenwriter. But now that I've been making them and I've been directing them as well, it's, it's something I enjoy so much as well that I'd be happy, honestly. I'd be happy if I just continue in this path and continue making them. But, ideally, you would get hired by other people who would recognize your talent, only just because then everything doesn't have to, land on my shoulders. Because literally, I mean, I work on a film usually at least 2 years in a row, between writing to, development, pre-production, production, post-production, then marketing. Just to give you an example, I wrote All Girls Weekend August 2004, and now it's being released July 2016. And even after it gets released, which is already 2 years after it was written, you know, I also still have to do marketing and following up and sales internationally.
You said 2000. You said 2004. You meant 2014.
I'm sorry. Yeah, 2014.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So okay.
I went on a you know, time lapse back. No, 2014. So that's 2 years. And then I still, you know, we still have sales internationally to worry about, and, you know, and film markets and more film festivals. So it could be another year of working on it on top of, you know, the other films that I've done and the ones that I want to continue doing. So it's a lot of work. So if I get hired and I can just, you know, either just write a script or just step into a set, direct and walk away from the project, then you're not so tied to that project for so many years. Producing is probably the longest job that you have.
Yeah. And so you're also doing some of the distribution as well? You're taking the film to these various film markets. You're doing that?
Well, we have sales agents, but, you know, it's always good to go out. You never know. I mean, I can't, you know, I've been to cons, I've been to AFM the last couple of years, just because you don't know. You could be sitting there and you make a connection, you know, with somebody, and they didn't meet with your sales agents, but now they find out about your film through you. So it's always helpful to do your part in trying to sell it. I mean, obviously the sales agent is the primary person who's trying to do that for you, but once in a while it's you know, it doesn't hurt. Plus you learn about what's selling, you know, you learn about what distributors are looking for, because, you know, it's great to write a script or make a film, but if you don't sell it, then all you're going to have, you know, is it's a nice, you know, script on a shelf or a movie, you know, just sitting on a shelf. I mean, ideally you're making it so that you can actually share it with the world.
Yeah, for sure. So how can people see All Girls Weekend? Do you know kind of the release schedule, where it will be released and what the dates are?
Well, it releases July 12th on VOD, and that's going to include Comcast. Boy, I have a full list, but iTunes, Amazon, Xbox, Google Play, a couple of other cable networks, but Cox. Okay. I forgot the other ones. And then the DVD will be available sometime in the fall. That date has not been set yet.
Okay, perfect. So I always like to just wrap up the interviews by asking the guests if they can just talk about their Facebook page or Twitter page, anything you feel comfortable sharing so that people can kind of just follow along with what you're doing. Okay, well, on Facebook, it's you know, facebook.com /All Girls Weekend. It's the same thing for Twitter. I think on Instagram, it's All Girls Weekend 2015. And I think that's it for the social media. For me, everything is Ms. M.S. Lou Simon. Just because I used to get emails all the time saying Mr. Simon, it's like no. So I adopted. I get the opposite emails all the time. People saying Miss Myers, Miss Ashley Myers. So that's probably not a bad idea.
That makes sense. Yeah. So I've embraced the Ms. part so that people know. Yeah. Perfect. Well, Lou, I really appreciate your coming on and talking with me today. Excellent interview. I wish you the best of luck with this film. Thank you, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you. We'll talk to you later. Okay, bye-bye. Bye. A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each of the readers who work for SYS, this SYS script analysis service, and you can pick the reader who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, character,
characters, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on features or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your projects, this is a great way to do it. We will also write a logline and synopsis for you if you'd like us to read the script and write your logline and synopsis. You can add that service as to an analysis, or you can simply purchase it as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your script gets a recommend from a reader, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same blast service I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. In the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Mark Allen. He's a screenwriter who lives in Washington State and has still managed to find some success with his screenplays. Like a lot of my guests, he's a guy who started out just by shooting a super low budget feature film, and then since then he's been able to sell and option a few scripts to various producers. We talked through his entire story from the very, very beginnings. He was in the military, got interested in screenwriting, went out and did this low budget film, continued to write, and has networked and made some connections. And as I said, he sold and optioned several scripts. So he'll tell us his entire story in that episode. So keep an eye out for that next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Lou. I hope it don't sound like a broken record. I love how Lou just went out and did it. She didn't wait for someone to buy her script or hire her as a director. She just went out, raised the money, produced the film, and made things happen for herself. She didn't wait for permission from someone. That's one of the biggest things I see with screenwriters. They write a script, they send it to contests, they send it to the blacklist, they send it through my service, and then they just wait for producers to contact them. And sometimes you just got to get out there and make things happen for yourself. So many of the people who come on this podcast have similar stories where they just went out and made a movie and that got their career started. So I really do believe in this as a viable way to start a career, a viable way to just get yourself out there and start making things happen. Obviously, I'm trying to do this with my own film, with The Pinch. I've sold many scripts over the years. I've been hired to write scripts. I mean, I've been working as a screenwriter for many, many years, but none of these experiences have been even remotely creatively fulfilling. And really listen to that from someone who has sold an option. I mean, I've optioned dozens of scripts, sold, probably a half dozen scripts at this point. And those experiences have really left me feeling like it's not really worth the effort in many cases. And that's what I'm trying to do with The Pinch. I'm trying to create something, that has more of my voice and that I just have more creative control over. So even if you're someone who thinks, I just want to make my living as a screenwriter, I just want to sell scripts, I definitely think producing your own material is a great way to go. Having that experience will just it will make you a better writer. If all you want to do is write, going out and producing, even if it's just a short film, writing, directing, and producing your own film, it will just make you understand what's difficult. Like, gee, some of these scenes that I thought were going to be easy to shoot, they ended up being very difficult. And it will make you more conscious about what you are going to, how you're going to write your own scripts and what you're going to include in your own scripts. And this is just a big learning experience for myself too. As I have mentioned, I've never been like the full main producer on a project. And so now that I really got in with The Pinch on the nitty gritty nuts and bolts, I realized, like, gee, this is going to be hard for every single fight scene. Every time someone throws a punch or starts fighting, you need to bring that stunt coordinator on. And there was a few stunts, a few times where people were punching or kicking each other. And I'm like, yeah, do we really need that? It's going to make it more expensive. It's going to make it harder. Those fight scenes take a lot of time. And we do have some of them. Some of them were definitely needed for the story. And so we made an effort to keep those in The Pinch. But it's just a lot of those things, going through this experience, really being conscious of production design, especially on a production that is this low budget like The Pinch. I really was working very closely with the costume designer, the makeup people and the production designer. And so you get really firsthand experience with these things and understanding what's going to be difficult and what's not going to be difficult. So again, even if all you want to do is write scripts, if you're just starting out, I would highly recommend going and producing something, even again, if it's just a short film, just to get your hands sort of in that, and really mix it up a little bit. But ultimately, I think it's also a very viable way to launch a career as a filmmaker. Hopefully, you're here because you've written a script. So hopefully you really cherish and respect how important it is to have a good script and then taking it to that next level. I think, Lou is a great example of that. She's just a great template, a great model for all of us, just of someone who went out there and made things happen for yourself. So hopefully that's the lesson, or at least one of the lessons you're getting from that interview. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.